If you leave that gate closed, they all die. You understand that, Doc? The voice in Leah's headset crackled under layers of static and distant gunfire. The blast shutters trembled again, dust raining from the concrete lintel above the trauma bay door. Al-Sara talk tonight, Doc. Another voice cut in, tighter, colder. You are ordered to keep that casualty corridor sealed. We cannot risk a breach at the inner gate. Say again, do not open that gate. Hospital Corpsman, second class. Leah Hahn stared at the CCTV screen. Beyond the inner blast door, the camera showed a sliver of hell. A burning MRAP, tracer streaks, silhouettes dragging someone limp toward the gate. The timer in the corner rolled over. 2:13:07 UTC +3. One of the silhouettes stumbled, turned toward the camera, and even through the grainy night vision feed, she recognized the gate. Holt, the squad's point man. The one who'd laughed the loudest when they'd called her Band-Aid Queen. Doc, it's Viper 1-2. Holt's voice burst over a different net, breathless, cut with explosions. We are black on ammo, black on blood. I've got 2 critical. If you don't crack this gate in 10 seconds, you might as well cross our names off your board right now. Her hand hovered over the manual release lever, the metal slick with sweat and someone else's blood. Behind her, 3 stretchers were already occupied, monitors beeping out fragile rhythms. The other medics watched her, eyes wide, waiting for a decision that wasn't theirs. Leah, Tuck said again, quieter now. If the enemy rides that push and gets through with them, the whole base is compromised. That's not just your team. That's everyone. She could hear Holt coughing on the open net, someone else screaming wordlessly, rounds pinging off armor near the microphone. 10 seconds. Open the gate and risk the base. Keep it shut and sign their death certificates. Leah closed her eyes for half a heartbeat. Then she opened them, stared at the lever, and, 16 hours earlier, Al-Sara Base, 1000L, UTC 3. Al-Sara Base at 1000L was already too bright. The kind of white-hot glare that flattened every shadow and made the gravel look like broken glass. Hospital Corpsman, second class. Leah Hahn stepped out of the aid station with a clipboard tucked under her arm and an aid bag slung over one shoulder, the canvas digging into the same bruise it had dug into yesterday. She shifted it higher and kept walking toward the covered pull-up bars where the platoon was gathered. They saw her before she reached them. A ripple of whistles and exaggerated groans rolled through the line of men in tan t-shirts and sweat-darkened shorts. "Make way, boys," Senior Chief Petty Officer Briggs called, voice carrying easily over the clink of metal and labored breathing. "Trauma Queen incoming," someone muttered. "Band-Aid Queen, Senior," just loud, enough to be heard. Laughter followed. Leah kept her face neutral. The trick was to let the words wash over her without sticking, the same way she had learned to tune out mortar whistles until they were too close to matter. She stopped at the edge of the mat, waited until the last set of pull-ups was done, then clicked her pen. "Medical clearance check," she said. "Lieutenant Riker wants updated vitals before tonight's training ruck. Line up by squad, please." Briggs didn't move. Neither did the others. From the bench where he'd been stretching, Lieutenant Daniel Riker looked up, sweat beading along his hairline. "You heard the doc?" he said mildly. "Humor her. We don't step off tonight without med-green lights." There was the faintest stress on doc, as if the word had quotation marks around it. But the platoon shuffled into loose lines anyway, grumbling. She worked down the line with practiced efficiency. Blood pressure cuffs, pulse oximeter, quick questions about medications, injuries, sleep. They answered in monosyllables or jokes. One operator claimed he'd slept like a baby, woke up crying every hour. Another tried to flex his way into a lower heart rate. She noted the ones with tremors in their hands, the subtle tightness around the eyes that didn't match their banter. "Look at that," Briggs said as she wrapped a cuff around his bicep. "All this training, and they send us someone who lifts pens instead of weights." "The pen's heavier than it looks, Senior," Leah answered. "Try not to strain yourself." There was a beat of silence, then a few chuckles, surprised, edged. Briggs' mouth quirked, but his eyes stayed flat, assessing. When she finished the last operator, Riker clapped his hands once. "All right, hydrate, chow, then back here at 1300 for rehearsal brief. Obstacle course tonight, 2300 step off, ruck tomorrow." He glanced at Leah. "Han, you'll be observation only on the night lane. No need for you to get in the dirt." Observation only. A polite way of saying stay out of the way. "Yes, sir," she replied. Briggs wasn't done. "Actually, LT," he said, loud enough for everyone. "Might be worth seeing what our Band-Aid queen can do before we trust her with our broken parts." He jerked a thumb toward the obstacle course visible beyond the HESCO barriers, walls, rope climbs, low crawls under netting. In the late morning heat, it shimmered like a mirage. Riker frowned. "We've got a schedule, Senior." "Won't mess your schedule," Briggs said. "One lane, no gear, just her aid bag. Consider it baseline data." All eyes swung back to Leia. RO for training was clear. No live rounds on the course. Bolts removed from the M4A1s stacked in the rack. Safety officers on standby to halt the lane at any hint of injury. No one could order her to run, but no one had to. Refusing would write its own story. Leah looked past them, tracing the course in her mind. Wall, pit, rope, low crawl, balance beam, final sprint. She imagined adding the weight of her aid bag, every item she refused to leave behind. She could already feel the strain in her shoulders. She could also feel the phantom pressure on her chest from another time, another base, when someone had said, "We didn't think you'd be fast enough," while they zipped a bag. "I'll run it," she said. The reaction was a low, satisfied murmur. They timed her with someone's watch. Briggs jogged at her side, calling out imaginary casualty updates to throw her off. "Patient's losing pulse, Doc. You sure you packed the right Band-Aids?" She ignored him and focused on movement. 3 points of contact on the wall. Breathe on the rope. Keep the aid bag close so it didn't swing and pull her sideways. By the time she stumbled across the spray-painted finish line, lungs burning, sweat stinging her eyes, her legs felt like poured sand. Briggs clicked the stopwatch and held it up where she couldn't see. "Well?" someone called. Briggs looked at the time, then at her, then turned to the whiteboard hanging on the side of the pull-up rig. It listed names and numbers. Night O course, full kit. Barely legible under layers of old marker. He uncapped a pen with his teeth and wrote her name in smaller letters at the bottom, adding the number with a flourish. The time was bad. Not catastrophic, but slow enough to earn a few theatrical winces. "You call that training?" One of the younger operators jeered. Laughter again, sharper this time. Leah bent over, hands on her knees, catching her breath. She didn't argue. Arguing wouldn't change the time. It wouldn't change the fact that they measured respect in seconds and kilograms and rounds on steel. "Observation only tonight," Riker repeated, more firmly now. "That's an order, Han. You've done enough." She straightened, nodded, and walked back toward the aid station with her bag digging into her bruised shoulder. Hours later, when the heat finally bled out of the sky and the base settled into the bluish half-dark of evening, Leah slipped back to the obstacle course alone. The whiteboard still bore her name at the bottom, the number beside it an accusation in dry erase ink. She tightened the straps on her aid bag, set the timer on her watch, and took her mark at the start line. No whistles, no jeers, just the distant hum of generators and the quiet decision that, if they were going to mock her training, she'd make sure the next time it mattered, she was faster than their jokes. By 2100 L, Al-Sara base was a different world. The heat had bled away, leaving the desert chilled and sharp-edged. Floodlights haloed off, plunging the live fire range into controlled darkness. Only the faint red glows of chem lights marked lane boundaries, and, beyond them, the landscape dissolved into black. Leah stood on the metal catwalk above Lane 3, aid bag at her feet, hearing her own breath echo in the space under her plate carrier. A range safety vest flared dull orange over her camis. "Remember," the range safety officer said for the third time, leaning on the rail beside her. "Your observation only, Doc. You see anything off, you tell me, I call ceasefire. Nobody goes down until I say lane is cold. Range ROE, copy?" "Copy," Leah answered. Below them, silhouettes moved at the start line, Viper platoon, broken into fire teams. ANPVS-14 devices sat flipped up on helmets, ready to come down. M4A1s hung slung across chests, magazines seated, bolts locked to the rear until the command. From the far end of the catwalk, Lantin Riker's voice carried up. "This is combat simulation, not Instagram content. You miss your hits, you'll hear about it tomorrow. You flag a teammate, I will personally staple you to the safety board." Muted laughter rolled back to them. Leah rested her gloved hands on the cold rail, watching Holt among the line of men. She'd learned the names faster than they'd learned hers. It was easier to track their injuries that way. Holt pivoted his shoulders, loosening up, the picture of relaxed aggression. "Viper 1, stand by," the RSO called. Nods down. Green lenses clicked into place. The range went alien, a wash of phosphorescent shapes and shadows. Leah's unaided eyes saw nothing but faint outlines. She would get nods only for real missions, not for this. Observation only. "Up and fire!" The night exploded into quiet violence. Suppressed shots cracked in brisk rhythm, tiny muzzle flashes hidden to the naked eye, but bright stars in Leah's memory. Targets, steel pop-ups downrange, fell with metallic clanks. The shooters flowed from position to position in practiced choreography. 3-round bursts, move, cover, move again. Leah tracked them, mapping who favored which shoulder, who hesitated on transitions, who kept glancing down at his footing instead of scanning. It was all data. Someday, one of those men would be on a table in front of her, and how efficiently she could reach him might depend on knowing how he moved when he thought no one was watching. Halfway down the lane, one shooter stumbled. It was subtle at first, a hitch in his stride as he vaulted a low barrier. He landed short, ankle twisting. His muzzle dipped, then jerked sideways as he tried to recover. 3, watch your lane! The RSO snapped into his headset. "Muzzle discipline! Muzzle!" The shooter went down hard, weapon clattering. His helmet bounced off the packed earth with a hollow sound Leah felt in her own teeth. He rolled once and didn't come back up. Something in the rhythm of fire stuttered. Leah's fingers tightened on the rail. The injured shooter's buddy glanced back, but kept moving, as his training demanded. Targets were still standing. The drill was still live. The operator was now a dark lump on the lane, range ROE dictating that no one approached until a ceasefire was called. "Cease," the RSO began. A stray round snapped into the berm a few feet from the downed man, throwing a puff of dirt over his unmoving boots. Leah moved before the rest of the word left the RSO's mouth. She grabbed her aid bag and vaulted the nearest set of stairs, boots clanging on metal steps. The sudden sound cut across the disciplined cadence of shots. "Han!" Riker's voice barked over the catwalk, sharp and furious. "Get off the... Cease fire! Cease fire! Cease fire!" The RSO roared, voice cracked raw now. "All lanes cold! Weapons on safe!" Silence fell in a ragged wave, the last round echoing into the night as Leah hit the ground and sprinted for the downed shooter. The world shrank to the green-tinged silhouette in front of her and the thud of her own heart under her vest. "Don't move," she called as she slid to her knees beside him. "Weapon?" His M4 lay a meter away, muzzle pointed harmlessly into the dirt. "Good." She pushed his shoulder gently, fingers probing for helmet fractures. His eyes fluttered open behind the NVG mount, unfocused. "Doc?" he slurred. "Yeah," she said. "Stay with me. What's your name?" "Cruz," he muttered. "I'm fine, just..." He tried to sit up. Pain carved a groove through his voice and shut him down again. Ankles shot, Leah decided, hands already at his boot, checking for obvious breaks. "And you bounced your head on the deck. Congratulations! You're benched!" She wrapped a quick figure 8 around the ankle, snug but not strangling. Behind her she could feel Riker's presence before she heard him, boots crunching on the dirt, anger radiating like heat. "What part of observation only was unclear?" he demanded. Leah finished her knot, checked distal pulse, and only then looked up. In the washed-out light of the range, his face was a mask of shadow. "You didn't see the round hit near his feet?" she asked, voice steady. "You were still calling ceasefire. If someone had jerked a shot, we'd be working a GSW instead of an ankle sprain." "The procedure," the RSO cut in, breathless, "is that no one steps onto the lane until..." "The lane is cold," Leah finished for him. "I heard you. I also heard his helmet hit from up there." Riker glanced at Cruz, who grimaced as he tried to adjust. The lieutenant's jaw worked. For a heartbeat, Leah thought he might tear into her right there in front of the platoon. Instead, he exhaled slowly. "Get him to the aid station," he said. "We'll debrief this later." 2 operators moved in to help. One of them was Holt. He slung Cruz's arm over his shoulders without comment, but his eyes lingered on Leah's for a second longer than necessary. She caught the flicker of something there. Not gratitude exactly, but recalibration. He'd watched her drop from the safe perch without waiting for permission. As they hobbled off toward the edge of the range, Leah picked up Cruz's rifle, verified it was on safe, then handed it butt first to Holt. His gloved fingers brushed hers. "Nice sprint, Doc," he said quietly. "Guess you do more than count Band-Aids." It wasn't quite respect, not yet, but it wasn't mockery anymore. Back on the catwalk, as the next squad reset for the lane, Riker stood with his hands on the rail, shoulders tight. Leah climbed the stairs and took her place beside him again, the aid bag heavy at her feet. "You and I," he said without looking at her, "will talk about boundaries." "Yes, sir," she replied. She straightened her vest, eyes already back on the lane, tracing the dance of green shadows. Rules or not, she had seen what happened when everyone waited for the perfect moment to act. Tonight, she had moved first. Next time, she told herself, she might not have that luxury. The morning after the night shoot, the desert snapped back to blistering clarity. By 1400 L, the light over Al-Sara base had gone from harsh to hostile. The kind that punished anyone dumb enough to be outside without a reason. Leah had a reason. She stood in the cramped S4 office, aid bag at her feet, sweat trickling down between her shoulder blades under her blouse. A map of the base was pinned to the wall, a laminated sheet several rotations out of date, edges curling. "Current schematics?" she asked, keeping her tone neutral. "Anything with updated routes for vehicle traffic and construction closures?" The supply lieutenant didn't look up from his screen. "What you see is what we got, Doc." "It still shows the old fuel point," Leah said, "and the medical tent on the east side. We moved 6 weeks ago." "Congrats on the new real estate," he said. "Engineering's backed up. They'll print new ones when they print new ones." She stepped closer to the wall map, tracing the lines with her eyes. The printed evacuation arrows spidered out from the outer gate, snaking past the motor pool, then doglegging twice before reaching the med area. Each bend was a potential choke point. "Look," she tried again. "I'm not asking for classified layouts, just anything that shows current walls and vehicle choke points. In a mass casualty event, we got a fire drill plan." The lieutenant cut her off. "No one's dropping Artie on us. Threat board says low probability." He finally glanced at her. "You're medical. Worry about inside your tent. We'll worry about where the trucks drive." "Inside your tent." "Copy," she said tightly. Outside, the air hit her like opening an oven. Generators droned somewhere nearby, the smell of diesel lying thick over hot dust. MRAPs sat in neat rows near the motor pool, their tan armor plates shimmering, tires exuding that distinct hot rubber smell. She started walking. If she couldn't have updated maps, she would make her own. From the motor pool, she followed the marked lane toward the inner gate. HESCO barriers on the left, stacked Connex boxes on the right, a perfect funnel. A forklift rumbled past, forcing her to flatten against the wall. This was the official route. In a crisis, everyone would use it. She imagined an MRAP parked wrong, a forklift stalled sideways, panicked drivers trying to go both directions at once. She saw stretchers wedged between bumpers, seconds sloughing away, while someone argued about who was blocking whom. Her chest tightened, the air thinning around her. A memory rose uninvited. A different base, different war, a concrete corridor choked with gurneys and bodies and shouting. A wheeled litter stuck at a bend, 3 people trying to lift it over a toppled cart, while someone inside the trauma bay screamed for more blood. A boy on the floor, hand slipping from hers as she tried to reach the blocked door. "Doc, you all right?" The voice snapped her back. A young Army specialist from base security, leaning in the thin shade of a HESCO wall, cigarette unlit between his fingers. "Fine," Leah said. "Just walking the lines." He gestured toward a sign. "Careful near the ammo dump. Non-essential personnel aren't supposed to loiter. ROE from the big brains." "I'm very essential," she said dryly. "I sign your profile if you break something." He snorted. "Fair." He pointed down the main lane. "Road's clear that way to the inner gate. Big, obvious, idiot-proof. Just follow the other sheep." She followed his gesture, then deliberately looked the other way. Between 2 stacked containers, there was a gap. Not big, just wide enough for one person with gear on to slip through sideways. Beyond it, she caught a glimpse of rough ground and the edge of a concrete culvert. "Anyone use that cut-through?" she asked. The specialist glanced, shrugged. "Maintenance guys sometimes. Not for vehicles. Drops you near the inner gate wall. Kind of a pain if you're lazy." Lazy wasn't her problem. "Thanks," she said. She slid through the gap, aid bag scraping against corrugated metal. On the other side, the noise of the main lane dulled, replaced by the faint chop of helicopter rotors somewhere far off and the soft grind of her boots in the sand. The alley ran between the back of the Connex boxes and a low wall, just wide enough to move at a fast walk. It bent once, then again, then opened near the inner gate where a stretch of open ground was shielded by a jutting blast wall. From here, the clinic was a straight shot, a diagonal line that cut off 2 full corners of the official route. Leah checked her watch, then walked the distance back to the motor pool at an unhurried pace. 1 minute, 40 seconds. She reset the timer, took a breath, and set off again at a jog, aid bag bouncing against her hip. This time she focused on foot placement, on how the bag shifted when she squeezed through the tight spots. Her lungs burned by the time she reached the blast wall. 1 minute, 3 seconds. She imagined doing it with someone on a litter, or with both hands inside a chest wound, or with rounds cracking overhead. Even doubling the time, she was still faster than the idiot-proof lane. Faster meant more blood where it needed to be. On the third pass, she added a mental overlay. MRAPs staging here, casualty collection point there, security guns oriented down that corridor. Her mind turned the alley into a thin, hard artery feeding the heart of the base. When she finally ducked back out into the official lane, sweat plastered her blouse to her spine. Briggs was there, because of course he was, leaning against a vehicle with a water bottle in hand, watching her like she was a mildly entertaining bug. "Doc," he called. "You planning to run circles around the base all day, or you training for the Olympics?" "Just getting steps in, Senior," she said. "Gotta keep up with the pen lifting." He smirked. "You know all this doom jogging doesn't change the threat board, right? Intel says if we get anything, it's a couple harassment rounds. You're not gonna need a NASCAR pit crew for casualties." "Hope they're right," Leah replied. He shook his head, amused. "Stay in your lane, Band-Aid Queen. Inside the tent, you're queen of the Band-Aids. Out here, we'll handle the roading." She let the jabs slide. It didn't matter if he believed her roots existed. The alley was in her legs now, in the timing on her watch, in the map forming behind her eyes. That night, back in the small corner of the clinic she claimed as her own, Leah opened her notebook. Between pages of vitals and supply lists, she drew a rough sketch. Motor pool, alley, inner gate, clinic. She didn't label it, just added a small arrow and a number beside it. 103. If the day ever came when the official routes failed and minutes turned to deaths, she wouldn't argue with anyone. She would just pick up her aid bag and run where the map in her head told her to go. The Tactical Operations Center always felt a few degrees cooler than the rest of Al-Sara, the air conditioning fighting a constant losing battle with desert heat and human bodies. At 1600 L, the place smelled of coffee, dust, and tiredness. Leah stood against the back wall, squeezed between a comms rack and a stack of boxed printer paper, her notebook tucked under one arm. Up front, a projector splashed washed-out slides across a white screen. S2's afternoon threat brief. "We assess the likelihood of coordinated indirect fire as low," the GO Intel captain was saying. A red ring pulsed on the map, encircling the region. Limited reporting of 81mm mortar tubes moving across the border, but no firm pattern. Expect harassment, if anything. He clicked. The next slide showed a color-coded matrix. Bottom line, we stay at yellow. Normal operations with standard vigilance. No justification for full lockdown postures. Riker sat near the front, sleeves rolled, eyes half-lidded but tracking. Briggs lounged beside him, chair tilted back just enough to annoy. "Questions?" the Intel captain asked. Leah raised her hand before she could talk herself out of it. The captain's gaze found her. A flicker of recognition, then polite condescension. Yes, Doc? Are the probable points of origin plotted relative to our current base layout? She asked. Specifically fuel point, ammo dump, inner gate, medical? If we catch a pattern on impacts, that affects where we stage casualty collection. The captain blinked. We've modeled likely arcs, he said. Nothing that changes our current defensive posture. Not defensive posture, Leah said. Evacuation posture. If we get more than a couple of harassment rounds, we'll need... The term harassment is doctrinal, he interrupted, weariness in his tone. It doesn't mean they're physically poking us with a stick. A faint chuckle ran through the room. Leah kept her voice steady. If we get even 3 accurate tubes, our clinic will be over capacity in minutes. We haven't run a mass casualty drill since rotation turnover. I recommend... Riker twisted in his chair to look back at her, expression unreadable. Han, he said, we have a 50-kilometer ruck on the schedule. Night step-off in 24 hours. My guys need sleep and calories, not another drill where we pretend the sky is falling. Sir, I'm not asking for a 4-hour FTX, she said. Just a walkthrough. Casualty collection points, vehicle routes, radio checks. Briggs glanced at her, then leaned toward Riker. LT, if we start rehearsing for incoming every time S2 waves a maybe, the boys will spend more time play-acting casualties than training to prevent them. He turned his head just enough that she saw the curve of his mouth. No offense, Doc. Some taken, Leah replied. The intel captain seized the lifeline. Our ROE is clear, he said. No visible posture change unless we see actual prep or contact. No siren drills just to make everyone jumpy, especially not with locals on base. We don't want to spook contractors or signal we've got jittery trigger fingers. Riker looked from the screen to Leah, weighing something. You have what you need to handle a handful of wounded if some idiot lobs a couple of rounds our way? I have what I have, she said. It's enough for peacetime. We are at peace, Briggs said. Mostly. Riker sighed. Noted, Han. But we're not changing the training schedule on a low-probability slide. After the ruck, we can revisit MassCAS. Copy? There it was. Not a complete dismissal, just a polite deferment to a future that probably wouldn't arrive. Copy, she said. The brief moved on. Route clearance updates, air corridor restrictions, a line about local political noise. Leah jotted a few notes more out of habit than need, her thoughts already elsewhere. Afterward, while the others filtered out in 2s and 3s, she approached the intel captain. Can I get a copy of the impact pattern models? She asked. Just for medical planning. He hesitated, then shrugged. They're rough, and classified beyond what medical usually handles. I won't frame them, Leah said. I just want to know which corners are hotter than others. He considered, then tapped a keyboard, printing a single black and white page. Don't leave it lying around, he warned. Outside, the sun had dropped just enough to throw long shadows. Leah walked the base with the page folded in her pocket, stopping periodically to glance and orient. If a tube fired from here, the likely arc would land. There. If it came from that ravine, the splashes would rake. That side. The patterns converged on familiar landmarks. The fuel point, the ammo dump, the inner gate corridor. Back at the clinic, she pulled her junior corpsman, Sanders, aside. I want 2 extra aid bags packed and staged, she said. One by the motor pool, one near the inner gate. Label them for trauma, not routine. Sanders frowned. We expecting something, ma'am? Intel says low probability, Leah replied. We plan for the outliers. ROE about stashing gear outside the tent? He asked. As long as it's not near the ammo dump, no one's going to court-martial us for being prepared. She softened it with a small smile. If they do, I'll write you a very sympathetic statement. They spent the next hour quietly overpacking. Tourniquets, chest seals, pressure dressings, IV start kits, a couple units of O-negative packed red cells in a portable cooler with a battery-powered warmer. It wasn't enough for a mass CAS, but it was more than nothing. After Sanders left to grab chow, Leah walked alone to the inner gate. The guard tower loomed above, a silhouette against the reddening sky. Contractors drifted past in small groups, laughing in languages she didn't speak, heading for their own tents. She found a shadowed recess behind a stack of Hesco, out of the direct line of sight from the road, and tucked the aid bag there, memorizing the exact placement. One step here, turn, reach, automatic even in the dark. Above, the camera on the gate swiveled slowly, its arc leaving a small blind spot near the ground. Leah watched it complete a lazy revolution, then glanced back toward the clinic in the distance. Low probability, she thought. The words felt like a talisman someone had dropped in the sand. She didn't pick them up. The night had gone quiet in that particular way bases got quiet after midnight. Not silent, just thinner. The steady hum of generators, the occasional clank of a loose Hesco panel in the wind, far-off laughter from someone's movie night. Inside the medical tent, the air smelled of antiseptic and coffee gone bitter on a hot plate. Leah sat at a metal desk, finishing the last of the day's charting. Sanders snored softly in a camp chair, boots still on, a blanket half fallen to the floor. On the whiteboard mounted by the door, she'd written the next day's schedule: sick call, heat checks, ruck prep. Under it, in smaller letters only she cared about, she'd added recheck staged kits, motor pool, inner gate. Her pen hovered for a moment over the word inner, then dropped when the first blast hit. It started as a distant thump, a sound her bones recognized half a second before her ears did. The tent shook, a puff of dust sifting down from the seams. A heartbeat later, the concussion rolled through, flattening the air in her chest. Sanders jerked awake and fell out of his chair. What the? The second round landed closer. This time the noise slapped the canvas walls, followed by a high-pitched rip as something metallic tore or fell. The bass siren wound up with a banshee wail. Mortars, Leah said, already on her feet. Move. She crossed the distance to the med lockers in 3 strides, flipping on the emergency lighting. The main overheads flickered twice and died. The generator surge not yet caught up. For a moment, everything was lit only by the thin red LEDs of the backup strips, washing the tent in blood-colored dimness. Sanders, wake up talk on the mednet, she ordered. I want confirmation on impact locations. Start the walking blood bank recall list. He scrubbed a hand over his face, adrenaline catching up as he fumbled for the radio handset. Roger, Mednet 3, copy. Outside, the siren's tone shifted. Lockdown red, this is not a drill. A voice blared over the loudspeakers, chopped by static. All personnel shelter in place, security elements to pre-designated positions. Repeat, lockdown red. Leah's heart rate spiked, but her hands were steady. She yanked open drawers. Trauma shears, tourniquets, chest seals, airway kits, IV sets. She laid them out on the main treatment table in precise rows, transforming it from exam room to trauma bay in less than 30 seconds. Another impact. Closer. The tent shuddered, poles groaning. A tray of instruments rattled and fell, clattering across the floor. "Impact grid?" she called. Sanders pressed the handset to his ear, straining against overlapping voices. Talk says 3 confirmed impacts. North sector, near motor pool and contractor housing. Possible 4th, say again. Possible 4th, near inner gate. No BDA yet. He looked up, eyes wide. They're still walking rounds in. Contractor housing, the motor pool, the inner gate. Everything she'd traced on that folded printout lifted like a ghost map in her mind. Corners, arcs, converging on the same vulnerable corridors. The first casualty arrived less than a minute later. 2 MPs half-carried, half-dragged a man through the flap. A contractor in dusty civilian clothes, blood matting the side of his face. His eyes rolled, unfocused. "Fragmentation left side," one MP panted. "He was near the fuel point when—" "Get him on bed 1, Leah snapped. "Sanders, airway, and C-spine. I'll check for penetrating wounds." Her gloves were on before her brain caught up. Hands moved on autopilot. Tilt, jaw thrust, sweep. No sucking chest wound, no obvious shrapnel vents. The bleeding from his scalp looked worse than it was. Scalp wounds always did. "GCS 12, Sanders reported, breathing on his own. "Good," Leah said. "Sandbags under his head, keep him midline. Next." As if summoned, they came. A trickle at first. 2 more contractors with peppered limbs and dazed expressions. An MP with superficial burns up one arm, smelling of smoke and burnt hair. Then the trickle became a flow. Someone from maintenance with a piece of metal through his bicep. A cook with abdominal pain that might be panic, might be internal bleed. Lockdown red or not, the wounded found their way. Leah triaged with ruthless economy. Green tags for walking wounded who could sit and wait. Yellow for those who could deteriorate. Red for those on the edge. She dispatched Sanders to start IVs, called for litter bearers from whoever happened to be upright. Turned away a staff sergeant who insisted his stubbed toe was turning purple, with a look that could have stripped paint. "Talk update," she demanded between patients. Sanders pointed with his chin at the radio, propped on a shelf with the volume low but squawking non-stop. Voices overlapped, stepped on each other, broke off mid-sentence. She focused on the mednet. "This is Viper Actual. We've got at least 2 urgent surgical, 1 immediate, pinned near inner gate. Say again, pinned." Static. Another voice, stressed, on a different net bled through. Taking accurate small arms along the inner corridor, unknown number of shooters. The siren wailed again, then cut off. Distant automatic fire rolled like thunder. Leah's chest tightened. Inner gate. She thought of the alley, the hidden aid bag tucked behind Hesco. She imagined it sitting there stupid and full while men bled out 10 meters away. She bent over a contractor's leg wound, packing gauze into the crater, the motion practiced and efficient. Her penlight beam cut through the dim. The generator still hadn't kicked the main lights fully back on. "Mom," Sanders said quietly, coming close enough that only she heard. "We're almost out of red tags. I've got 2 waiting for CT that we don't have, 5 who need X-rays that we don't have, and we're down to our last 2 units of O-neg in the fridge." "We have 3 units," Leah corrected. "I took one to the forward kit by the inner gate." Sanders swallowed. "Right." On the radio, Viper came back, more garbled this time. "Han, this is Viper 1-2. We've got guys down and no medic. How copy? TOC says clinic is full, but we are black on blood out here." Her name snapped sharp through static. Not Doc, not Band-Aid Queen, Han, direct. She glanced at the tent flap. Outside, the world pulsed with distant explosions and the strobe of emergency lights. ROE under lockdown red says we stay put unless tasked, Sanders said, reading her face. TOC hasn't redirected us. Row, stay in the clinic. Let the wounded come to you, unless they can't. Leah finished tying off a bandage, her hands precise even as her thoughts sprinted. She saw the layout again, motor pool, alley, inner gate. 1 minute, 3 seconds, if she moved like she had in the heat. Sanders, she said, voice low but firm. You're in charge of the CCP until I get back. His eyes widened. Back from where? From doing my job, she said. You have green and yellow tags here who will live or die based on good nursing and not panicking. You can do that. I trained you for that. Another burst of gunfire cracked the night closer. On the net, Viper's transmission broke into a sharp, half-screamed fragment. We're losing him, Doc. We're losing... Leah grabbed a fresh aid bag. Not the one she kept under the main table, but the third she'd quietly packed. Extra tourniquets, hemostatic gauze, airway kit, a single unit of O-neg in a portable cooler. TOC is going to lose their mind if you step off, Sanders said. They can file paperwork after, she replied. Tell them HM2 Han is moving to establish a forward CCP near the inner gate, per request from Viper. Log the time. Leah, that's an order, petty officer. Her tone sharpened, leaving no room. You keep this place standing. Anyone who can walk helps you. Anyone who can't... She exhaled. We do what we can. She slung the bag over her shoulder. The canvas bit into the familiar bruise. At the tent flap, she paused just long enough to slap a helmet on, the chin strap still warm from the last time she'd worn it. She slid her rifle from the rack, suppressed M4A1, magazine seated, on safe, and let it hang across her chest. The radio crackled again. Inner gate holding for now, but we need... Leah stepped out into the dark, leaving the relative order of her tent for the chaos she'd been planning for in the back of her mind for weeks. The sirens, the gunfire, the shouted orders folded around her. The map in her head lit up. She turned toward the motor pool and the alley that would take her to the men calling her name. The world outside the medical tent was a chaos of color and noise. Red strobes pulsed along the main avenue of Al-Sara, each flash freezing shadows into jagged still frames. Sirens wailed and cut, replaced by shouted orders and the flat crackle of small arms fire in the near distance. The air tasted of dust and something acrid, burned propellant or overheated wiring, she couldn't tell. Leah kept her head low and her steps deliberate, aid bag banging against her hip, M4A1 slung tight across her chest. Around her, figures moved in staccato bursts between HESCO barriers and concrete T-walls, weapons up, eyes scanning. "Hey, you! Stop there!" a voice barked. A pair of base security troops stepped out from behind a barrier, rifles angled but not quite leveled. Their helmets glowed pale under the emergency lights. NVGs flipped up. HM2 Han, medical, she called, already reaching for the ID patch on her plate carrier. Forward CCP to inner gate. I'm moving to Viper. Lockdown red, the corporal closest to her said. Non-essential movement is restricted to shelters. Clinic staff stays in the CCP, that's the brief. Inner gate is my CCP now, Leah replied. They've got urgent surgical and no medic. On the net clipped to her vest, Viper's channel bled through under the general chaos. Contact front. They're probing. Where the hell is that blood? Leah jerked her chin toward the sound. That's them. The corporal hesitated, glancing back at the road ahead. The main route to the inner gate was a straight shot, but exposed, lined with stacked containers and vehicles. Even from here, Leah could see tracer fire stitching the air beyond the next intersection, a dirty orange against the black sky. A sergeant appeared at the corner, panting, his own rifle slung. "What's the holdup?" "Corpsman wants to step off," the corporal said. "To the gate, alone." "Not alone," Leah said. "With you." The sergeant gave her a once-over, helmet slightly askew, aid bag, rifle set to safe. Recognition flickered. "Band-Aid Queen, right?" "Viper's Doc." "Leah Hahn," she corrected. "And they're bleeding out while we stand here." He looked toward the main road. Another burst of gunfire answered him, sharper this time. Someone cursed over the radio, voice too distorted to place. "Main route's dirty," he said. "We've got reports of muzzle flashes in the second-story windows along that lane. ROE says no blind spraying into structures. We don't have PID, and there are probably locals hunkered down in there. So don't use the main route," Leah said. "There's a cut-through behind the Connex stack, by the motor pool. It drops us near the inner gate wall under cover. We'll be in defilade most of the way." The sergeant frowned. "There's no cut-through on the map." "It's there," she said. "I've walked it, timed it, with this bag." He stared at her for a long, taut moment. Another mortar impact boomed somewhere behind them, the concussion slapping their faces with a wave of hot air. "You're sure?" he asked. "Yes." He exhaled through his teeth. "I've got 3 bodies free," he decided. "We go with you. ROE stays in effect. Weapons tight, PID only, no spray and pray. You don't outrun our guns. Copy?" "Copy." The word lived on her tongue, familiar and clean. "Copy," she said. He tapped his radio. "Sierra 2, this is 2 Actual. I'm moving with HM2 Han to establish a forward CCP at inner gate via alternate route, grid." He rattled off coordinates from memory. "Say again, we're escorting medical? Don't shoot the girl with the red cross?" Someone on the other end snorted. "Roger, 2 Actual. You're clear. Watch your lanes." The sergeant nodded to her. "Lead on, Doc." The switch was subtle but real. Her at the front, them at her back. They moved out at a trot, cutting left toward the dark bulk of the motor pool. Leah kept one hand on her rifle, the other steadying the aid bag. Shadows lunged at them in the strobing light as they slipped between parked MR apps, the vehicles hulking like sleeping animals. "Stay close," she said over her shoulder. "The gap's narrow." At the rear of the motor pool, she found it by feel more than sight. The space between 2 stacked containers, just wide enough for a person to slip through sideways. The emergency lights didn't reach this far. Only a thin smear of starlight bled in. She turned sideways and slid into the gap, aid bag scraping metal. Behind her, boots scuffed as the others followed, one at a time. "Smells like something died back here," the corporal muttered. "Probably your sense of humor," the sergeant replied, but his voice was quiet, attention outward. The alley beyond was a strip of shadow between corrugated metal and low wall. Sand shifted underfoot. The hot wind funneled through, pushing dust into their faces. On one side, someone had spray-painted a crooked peace sign in black, half scrubbed away by time and weather. Gunfire sounded closer here, sharper, like someone slamming metal rods together just ahead. Leah's pulse picked up, but her breathing stayed measured. Left, bend, right. She could have walked this blind. "How much farther?" the corporal whispered. 30 seconds, she said. She didn't add, "if you can keep up." At the first bend, an orange flicker stained the sky beyond the wall, fire somewhere near the contractor housing. A low roar followed, the sound, of something collapsing. On her radio, Viper's net spiked. "This is Holt, inner gate, outer side. We are running out of blood here. We've got one with no radial pulse, one with—" Static chewed the rest, then spat out, "If we don't get a medic in 5 mics, we're losing bodies, talk." Leah's chest clenched. Holt. The memory of his face under NVGs on the range flashed up. The quick recalibration in his eyes when she dropped onto the hot lane without waiting. She picked up the pace. "Slow down," the sergeant hissed. "You go down, we all stop." "I know the route," she said. "You don't." He grunted, but didn't argue further. Another small arms burst cracked ahead, heavier caliber this time. Leah flattened instinctively against the wall as a round smacked into the far end of the alley with a dull thunk, showering them with pulverized concrete. "Contact?" the corporal asked, pressing his helmet tighter to his head as if that would help. "Wild rounds," the sergeant said, though his own rifle had come up, muzzle tracking. "Stay tight. Doc, you still good?" "Still breathing," Leah said. Her heart hammered, but her hands were steady on the aid bag strap. They emerged near the inner gate wall exactly where she'd known they would, in the shadow of a jutting blast barrier that shielded them from direct fire. Beyond it, the world erupted. Flashes of muzzle fire, shouted commands, the deeper boom of something heavier than rifles. The smell of smoke was thicker here, cut with the copper edge of blood. Leah ducked behind the blast wall, sucking in one quick, sharp breath. Over the top, she glimpsed the inner gate. The armored door, now sealed. The outer lane lit by burning debris. Figures crouched behind a shot-up MRAP, muzzle flashes licking from around its tires. Her aid bag suddenly felt twice as heavy. "Two actual. We're in position near inner gate," the sergeant reported, voice clipped. "We've got cover. Awaiting PID on contacts." Leah's radio crackled again, Holt's voice raw and close enough that it felt like he was shouting in her ear. "Night Doc, this is Holt at Viper 1-2. We are black on blood, do you copy? If we don't get you here now, we are bagging 3 of our own." Her throat tightened. Any lingering hesitation, any remaining thought of turning back to the relative safety of the clinic, burned away. She shifted her grip on the rifle, checked the aid bag strap one more time, and looked at the sergeant. "Route to them?" he asked. Leah nodded toward a narrow gap between 2 sections of Jersey barrier that opened into the kill zone beyond. "Through there," she said, "and then we run." Leah broke from cover on the sergeant's nod and sprinted through the gap. The kill zone beyond the blast wall felt like stepping into another planet. Heat rolled off burning debris, smoke stung her eyes, and something crackled in the wreckage of what had once been a light vehicle. Tracers stitched the air high overhead, red lines against the black sky. She kept her head down and ran for the MRAP. The armored truck squatted sideways near the inner gate like a wounded animal, nose angled toward the blast doors, front tires shredded. Its engine still idled, a low, uneven growl. Figures were clustered in its shadow, men in tan kit, weapons propped or abandoned in careful piles as hands turned instead to bandages and improvised tourniquets. "Leah!" Holt's voice cut through everything. He was kneeling on the ground, one knee in the dirt, one hand pressed hard into the groin of a man lying flat on his back. Blood seeped between his fingers in slow, dark pulses. Leah dropped beside them, aid bag hitting the ground with a dull thud. "Talk to me," she said. Holt's face was streaked with sweat and soot, teeth gritted. His right sleeve was torn and shiny with blood, not his. But he moved like he still had both arms. IED fragment or something, he said. High inside the thigh. I threw a tourniquet on, but I can't get it high enough. He's fading. The operator on the ground, Wilkes, Leah's mind supplied, the one who always brought extra protein bars to sick call, was pale beneath the grime, lips blue at the edges. His plate carrier had been cut open and shoved aside. A cat tourniquet bit into his upper leg, but fresh blood glistened closer to the groin. Name Wilkes, Leah said, leaning over him. You're at Alsara, inner gate. You've got a leak I'm not signing off on. You with me? His eyes flickered open, unfocused. Doc? She heard the question under the word. Am I dying? Not if you stay stubborn, she said. Holt, keep pressure, hard. If he yells, you're doing it right. ROE for this sector is still active defense only. The security sergeant called, dropping into cover by the MRAP's rear tire. We've got intermittent contact from that tree line. No one goes past the Jersey barrier without my say. Copy, Leah muttered, already digging into her bag. She worked by headlamp, the beam tiny but enough. She loosened the tourniquet just enough to see where the blood surged, then cinched it back down, jaw tight. The wound was high. Too high. She stuffed gauze into the channel Holt's fingers had made, adding hemostatic dressing, her movements swift and ruthless. Behind her, someone groaned. Another operator sat propped against the MRAP, one arm in a makeshift sling, blood soaking a bandage at his shoulder. A third man knelt nearby, one pant leg ripped open, shin wrapped in a bulky dressing. Both watched her, their eyes hollow and intent. How many total wounded? She asked without looking up. 4, Holt said. Wilkes is the worst. Lang's got a through-and-through shoulder. Corbett caught shrapnel. In the calf, You're functional, Leah cut in. You can complain later. He huffed something that might have been a laugh. On her wrist, under the glove, she could feel Wilkes's pulse thinning. Too fast, too weak. She glanced at the portable cooler on the ground. The single unit of O- swaddled inside. One bag, one life, maybe. Tosi, this is HM2 Han at Inner Gate CCP, she called into her handset, leaving it clipped so she could keep both hands on Wilkes. I have 4 wounded Viper operators. 1 immediate, 2 urgent, 1 delayed. We are black on blood forward except for 1 unit, and his pressure is crashing. Static hissed back then. Copy, Han. Medevac birds are grounded until indirect fire stops. Hold what you've got. Hold what you've got. As if that was a simple thing. Sanders, she said, imagining the younger corpsman back in the clinic. Don't you dare run out of O-neg on me. Wilkes's eyelids fluttered. Cold, he whispered. Leah saw the edge then. In his skin, in the way his chest rose shallowly. She'd stood on that edge before. She knew how fast it crumbled. She opened the cooler, her fingers careful despite the rush. The blood bag inside was dark and heavy, condensation beading on the plastic. You're not going to get enough volume out of that, the security sergeant said, not unkindly. He looks... Don't say it, Leah snapped. She turned to the other 2 wounded. Lang, Corbett. They straightened automatically at the sound of their names. Ma'am, Lang said. Sweat plastered his hair to his forehead, but his eyes were clear. What blood types? She asked. Lang blinked. OPOS, I think. Dog tag says. O-neg, Corbett said. Universal Donor Club. Why? Leah met his gaze. Because your teammate is bleeding faster than I can pour it back in. We've got 1 unit here, but it won't be enough. I need a walking blood bank now. Corbett looked down at his bandaged leg, then back at Wilkes. His throat worked. You want me to give while I'm hit? I want you to give because you're hit light and he's hit heavy, Leah said, not softening it. ROE for medicine is first, do no harm. Second, do the least harm. I can run you dry, wreck your night, and you'll still walk. He doesn't get more blood, he doesn't see morning. She watched the battle run across his face. Pain, fear, loyalty. Your call, she added. I won't order you, he snorted. You already kind of did, Doc. He shifted, grunting as his leg protested. Let's do it before I change my mind. She moved fast. IV catheters, tubing, clamps. She piggybacked the chilled O-neg into Wilkes first, catching the vein on the second try, then set a second line from Corbett's good arm, the old-school transfusion protocol she'd drilled the corpsman on, and hoped she'd never need this badly. Lang, you're my backup donor, she said. If he tanks, we tap you. Holt, you keep pressure and talk to him. I want him hearing your annoying voice the whole time. Copy that, Holt said. He leaned closer to Wilkes's ear. Hey man, you still owe me $50 from poker night. You die, I'm billing your family. Wilkes's mouth twitched. It was something. Leah watched the blood move. Two kinds now. Stored and warm, plastic and flesh, inching across clear tubing into a body trying hard to quit. She monitored Wilkes's face, his pulse, the faint rise in color under the grime. Gunfire continued in staccato bursts beyond their little island of light. The MRAP's engine idled, a steady mechanical heartbeat. Radios crackled with fragments of the wider fight. Contact reports, bearing calls, TOC's attempts to impose order on chaos. ROE for this sector remains hold fire unless PID confirmed, the sergeant called to his men. No one starts a war inside the wire because they saw a shadow. Leah tuned it out. For now, her war was 3 inches of plastic tubing and a narrowing window. Minutes stretched. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, Wilkes's pulse strengthened under her fingers. His breathing deepened. The skin around his mouth lost some of its gray cast. Pressure's coming back, she said quietly. He's not out of the woods, but he's off the cliff edge. Corbett's face had gone a shade paler, but he was still upright. She closed his line and started a saline flush, watching for signs of crash. Lang sagged a little in relief. His injured shoulder pressed against the MRAP's armor. We did it? Holt asked. We bought him time, Leah said. Don't confuse that with winning. She taped down the lines and secured dressings, making sure nothing would rip loose if they had to move fast. Next problem, she said, sitting back on her heels for the first time. We can't keep a CCP here forever. This lane is going to be a magnet if they push again. The security sergeant glanced toward the sealed inner gate, then at the dark beyond. TOC's talking about closing this corridor entirely if contact increases. They'll want you and your patients inside the hard buildings. Then we need to figure out how to get them there without turning them into targets, Leah said. On the net, a new call cut through, layered with urgency. All elements, be advised, possible movement near the contractor housing. Inner gate teams, prepare for potential push on your position. Holt's hand tightened on Wilkes's bandage. Corbett closed his eyes briefly. Lang muttered something under his breath that might have been a prayer. Leah looked at the blood slowly dripping into Wilkes's arm, the MRAP, the sealed gate, the blast walls. Forward, back, or stand and hope. None of the options were safe. She would have to choose anyway. Wilkes's pulse had steadied to a thin but stubborn thump by the time the order came down to move. Inner gate CCP, this is Toki. The radio crackled on Leah's vest. Indirect fire pattern decreasing. You are cleared to retrograde casualties to main clinic. Recommend route Charlie through contractor housing. Be advised, Corridor is designated no fire for civilians. Leah looked up from Wilkes's arm, where the tubing now ran clear saline. His skin had picked up the faintest hint of color. Not safe, just less dead. Route Charlie, the security sergeant muttered, crouched beside the MRAP's rear tire. Of course they want Route Charlie. Straight shot, bright lights, nice and easy. Where's Route Charlie? Leah asked, though she already knew. He jerked his chin toward the east. The main contractor strip. Rows of CHUs, snack stands, all that. They punched a corridor there earlier this tour. No fire zone. Big signs in 3 languages. Civies can move to shelter without getting stomped. And now? She said. As if to answer, a distant knot of shouting drifted in on the wind. Leah peered past the blast wall. In the direction of contractor housing, she could see scattered figures running in the glare of still-burning floodlights. Some in base-issued reflective belts, some in civilian clothes, all small and frantic under the night sky. Between them, shadows moved that weren't quite running with the crowd. Slower, more deliberate. Too disciplined. Her radio picked up another report, this one from a jittery Overwatch element. Tosi, this is Tower 3. Possible armed personnel mixing with civilians along Route Charlie. We've got shapes that don't match worker profiles. No clear PID, repeat, no clear PID. Copy, Tower 3, Tosi answered. Hold fire unless you have positive identification. No indirect into the corridor. The sergeant ground his teeth. So we get to drive right through that mess with wounded in the back. Leah's eyes went to Wilkes, to Corbett, now pale but stable, to Lang holding his shoulder stiffly, to the others who had drifted close enough that CCP had become a circle of strained faces. How long from here to the clinic if we take Route Charlie? She asked. In this chaos? The sergeant thought. 5, maybe 6 minutes, assuming nobody parks sideways or panics. And your alternate? She said. He glanced toward the outer wall. There's a maintenance sally port 2 blocks down. We can push a vehicle out along the outside service road, skirt the housing, and come back in near the motor pool. How long? Leah pressed. 10 minutes, maybe more, he said. Less traffic, more dark corners. That road's not meant to be pretty. More exposure, Holt put in. He was still kneeling by Wilkes, hand resting lightly over the bandage now, as if afraid to break whatever fragile balance they'd achieved. If anyone's out there waiting, we're gift-wrapped. Leah looked at the inner gate, sealed tight. At the MRAP they'd turned into a shield. At the faces watching her, waiting for a decision that wasn't supposed to be hers. ROE for Route Charlie says no fire without PID, the sergeant said. But if someone pops from that crowd, and we're in the middle of it with casualties in the back, then any response turns into shooting through civilians, Leah finished. A different kind of map aligned in her head. Not walls and alleys this time, but consequences. Easy route, high moral risk. Hard route, high physical risk. She pictured firing from the back of a truck into a crowd where workers and infiltrators blurred together. She pictured explaining that to a grieving family, to her own reflection. We're not turning a no-fire corridor into a free-fire zone because it's convenient, she said. Doc, I hear you, the sergeant said. But if we take the long way and your boy there bleeds out in minute 9, then that's on me, Leah cut him off. Not on you, not on your men, and not on some contractor who just wanted to stack pallets and go home alive. She keyed her radio. Toke, this is HM2 Han at Inner Gate. I recommend against Route Charlie for casualty movement. Possible infiltrators mixing with civilians. Any engagement will violate civilian ROE. Request clearance for alt route via Outer Service Road and Sallyport near Motorpool. There was a pause on the line. She could almost hear TOC weighing imagery versus doctrine versus paperwork. Han, that alt route is outside the main security cordon, Tosi answered. You'll be exposed. We're already exposed, she said. She kept her voice level, deliberate. The difference is whether we drag non-combatants into it. Another pause. Then, approved. Alt route authorized for medical movement. You will have one gun truck escort. Report when you're moving. The sergeant exhaled, somewhere between relief and grudging respect. You realize you just volunteered us for the scenic tour, Band-Aid Queen. Tour's on me, Leah said. Just keep the scenery from shooting us. They moved fast. A still mobile, up-armored truck rolled up from the rear, engine growling. They loaded Wilkes and Corbett onto improvised litters in the back. Lang wedged himself in along the side, his uninjured arm braced against the wall. Holt climbed in, refusing to be anywhere else. Leah took a knee between them, one hand on Wilkes's wrist, the other keeping her rifle from tangling in tubing. Outside, the security sergeant mounted the gun in the escort's turret. Another driver took the wheel. Last chance to pick the short road, Holt said quietly as the tailgate slammed shut. Leah met his eyes in the dim red interior light. You want to shoot past civilians and hope you only hit the ones shooting at you? He hesitated, then shook his head. Didn't think so, she said. The truck lurched into motion. Through the small rear window, Leah watched the inner gate fall behind them, the burning debris turning to smeared orange in the dust. They rolled toward the Sallyport, the escort's headlights off, running dark under NVGs. The outer service road was worse than she'd imagined. Narrow, uneven, hugging the base wall, lit only by whatever stray light leaked over the top. The driver picked his way along with the caution of someone who knew there could be more than potholes out here. Inside the truck, every bump translated to a tug on bandages and tubing. Wilkes groaned once. Leah adjusted her hand on his IV line. Stay with me, she said. We're almost home. Doc, the driver's voice came over the intercom, thin and tight. We've got movement ahead, near the culvert. Might be nothing. Might not. Leah shifted to the tailgate, peering through a crack. Up ahead, where the service road dipped, something darker than the night hunched near the drainage culvert. A pile of trash bags, maybe. Or someone who'd learned what trash looked like from overhead. The escort's turret swung a few degrees, barrel settling. R.O., the sergeant murmured. Hold, Leah said automatically, before she realized she'd spoken. As if on cue, the dark shape unfolded. Muzzle flash flared, bright and close. The first burst chewed into the dirt just off the road, a line of sparks and dust. The driver cursed, wrenching the wheel. The truck swayed, bodies slammed into each other in the back. Leah threw herself over Wilkes, shielding tubes and dressings with her own weight. Contact front, the sergeant roared from the turret. PID confirmed. The escort's gun answered, hammering the night. Rounds smacked into the truck's armor, each impact a full-body jolt. Lang grunted as his shoulder hit metal. Corbett grabbed at a handhold, teeth bared. Leah's heart slammed against her ribs. She could feel the rifle at her side like a live thing, no longer just a symbol of self-defense, but a tool she might have to actually use. Doc! Holt shouted over the noise. We can't stay in this funnel. She lifted her head, eyes going to the small view of the road ahead, to where movement flickered beyond the first shooter, more shadows shifting into position. The decision she'd made at the no-fire corridor had spared civilians from becoming targets. Now the only ones in the line of fire were them. She slid one hand from Wilkes's wrist to her rifle, fingers finding the selector switch by feel. "Then we make our own lane," Leah said, more to herself than anyone else, and braced for what came next. The first burst smashed into the side of the escort truck, with a sound like a sledgehammer on a dumpster. Leah felt the impacts through the floor plates, each one a dull, body-deep thud. The vehicle swerved, corrected. In the cramped rear compartment, bodies slammed against each other and metal. Someone cursed in a language she didn't track. "Gun truck, you good?" the driver shouted over the intercom. "Turret's still spinning," the security sergeant growled back. "Shooter at the culvert, possibly more on the bank. Hold this line." The heavier gun roared, a deep, chopping rhythm that shook dust from the ceiling. Through the crack near the tailgate, Leah saw muzzle flashes wink and die in the direction of the culvert, then spring up again a few meters away. Whoever was out there knew how to move. "Doc, Wilkes is dipping," Holt called behind her. She glanced back. Wilkes's face was beaded with sweat, lips parted. His pulse under her fingers had turned irregular again, like a drumline losing tempo. "We can't sit here," Leah said. Another burst from the tree line, higher this time. Metal shrieked overhead. "Turret, you're taking fire from elevation!" she snapped into her mic. "Bank left of the culvert. 20, maybe 30 meters. "How the hell do you know that?" the sergeant shot back. "Sound and angle," she said. "You want to argue or you want to shoot?" There was a beat. Then the turret swung. The gun thundered, stitching rounds along the bank she'd indicated. Clods of earth and rock exploded into the air. "Tower 3 to convoy," a new voice cut in, distant but focused. "We've got eyes on 3. Correction. 4 heat signatures along that service road. No civvies nearby. You've got 1 at the culvert and at least 2 on the slope above you, moving left to right." "Copy, Tower 3, the sergeant replied. "Convoy pinned. We're engaging." Another sharp crack, closer and higher. The gun's rhythm stuttered. "Turret!" the driver yelled. "I'm hit!" the sergeant shouted down. "Arm's dead. I can't hold the trigger." The escort's gun fell silent. In the sudden relative quiet, the enemy fire sounded even more precise. Rounds snapped past, searching for angles. A slug punched through the thin rear window with a spiderweb crack, glass shards tinkling onto the floor near Leah's boots. The truck had become a steel coffin. Holt's voice cut through the ringing in her ears. "We're just sitting here getting chopped up. We need suppression, or we're not moving." Lang's knuckles were white where he gripped the handhold, shoulder bandage already spotted through. Corbett's jaw was clenched, eyes fixed on the ceiling as if he could see through it. Leah's hand found her rifle almost without conscious thought. She flipped the selector from safe to semi by feel, the motion as smooth as taping down an IV line. The fear was there, of course it was, but it slid into a box somewhere behind her ribs. "Open the tailgate," she said. Holt stared at her. "That's a great way to get ventilated." "We're already getting ventilated," she said. "Difference is, right now it's one-sided." She keyed her radio to the escort net. "Turret is down. I can shoot. I need that tailgate popped 6 inches, no more." There was a pause. Then the driver's tight voice. "You're a medic, Han." "I'm the only one back here with 2 working arms and a functioning rifle," she replied. "You either let me add some outgoing to this party, or you write a lot of letters home." The latch clicked. The tailgate dropped with a creak, just enough to give her a low, horizontal slice of the outside world. "Doc, you don't have nods," Holt hissed. "No," she said. sliding forward on her stomach until her muzzle cleared the opening. But they do. She flicked on her IR laser. To the naked eye, she saw nothing, but in the Overwatch Tower's optics and in the escort's NVGs, a bright, tight dot would be hovering, waiting. "Tower 3, this is Han," she said into the radio. "You see my pointer?" "Affirm," the tower replied after a beat. "We've got your sparkle." "Talk me on," she said. "You call, I shoot." There was a strange calm in the space behind her words. She recognized it with a detached part of herself, the same calm that settled when she slid a scalpel into flesh, or opened a chest under fluorescent lights. Focus, action, outcome. Everything else could scream later. "Shooter on the slope, left," Tower 3 said. 10 degrees up from your muzzle, 5 right, stop. That's him, short of that rock. Paint him." Leah adjusted the rifle, feeling each micro-shift through stock and bone until the tower said, "Hold, that's good." She breathed in, breathed out, and let the front sight float. She squeezed. The suppressed shot was a sharp cough, almost polite under the larger booms. Brass spat past her face, tinkling onto the metal floor. Downrange, the muzzle flashes from that section of slope winked out. "One down," Tower 3 confirmed. "Nice shot." The next call came even faster. "Second shooter culvert just right of the mouth, he's peeking, sparkle him." Leah slid the dot, ignoring the grit under her elbows, the heat radiating from the truck's floor, the man bleeding out inches from her knee. The IR pointer hovered over dark. Squeeze, cough, tink, splash, Tower 3 said. "That's 2. The world narrowed to the slice of road she could see, and the voice in her ear. Move, aim, squeeze. Each time the target dropped or disappeared. Each time returning fire thinned. A distant part of her registered Holt's stunned silence, Lang muttering numbers under his breath as if tallying. Corbett's breathing fast but steady. "Han, if I didn't know better, I'd say you brought aimbot," Tower 3 said after her 4th shot. "Just call the next one," she replied. She didn't count how many she took. Her entire sense of time compressed too. Muzzle flash. Laser on. Trigger press. Towers splash. Each threat removed was another second for Wilkes's heart to keep beating. Another chance to move the convoy forward without taking rounds into the patient compartment. Finally, there was a longer pause. "Convoy, this is Tower 3, the Overwatch voice said. "We're not seeing any more movement around your position. Thermals clean out to 50 meters. You're clear to move." "Driver, punch it," the escort ordered. "Get us to that Sally port." The truck lurched into motion, bouncing over ruts. Leah slid back from the tailgate, flipping her rifle back to safe with the same care she'd use closing a chest. Her hands trembled only once when she let them. Holt stared at her like he was seeing a different person than the one who'd joined them weeks ago with a clipboard and a pen. "How many was that?" he asked. She blinked. "I wasn't counting." "Tower was," Lang said, voice hoarse. 7. 7 shots, 7 bodies. Under NVGs you don't even have." "Lucky night," she said. "That's not luck," Holt muttered. "Our best night fire on the range is 5 clean hits at that spread." "Range isn't real," Leah said. She checked Wilkes again. His pulse felt stronger now, absurdly. He was still precarious, still 1 bad minute away from crashing. But he was alive, and the truck was finally moving toward more light than shadow. Outside, the service road straightened, bending back toward the motor pool and the map in her head. In the cramped, rattling darkness, the smell of burned powder clung to her gloves. For the first time, Leah allowed herself to notice it. Just another residue, she told herself. Like iodine after a procedure. It didn't quite stick. The convoy burst back through the sally port like a cork from a shaken bottle. Inside the wire, the light changed from raw darkness to the jaundiced glow of emergency lamps. The escort truck fishtailed once on loose gravel, straightened, and roared toward the motor pool. Leah stayed braced over Wilkes until the brakes squealed and the vehicle lurched to a halt. "Move! Move! Move!" someone shouted outside. The tailgate dropped. Cool air rushed in, carrying the sharper smell of fuel and dust and distant smoke. Hands reached in, careful but urgent. Holt and another operator lifted Wilkes's litter. Leah tracked the lines, one hand hovering to keep them from snagging. "Watch the IV," she snapped. "If you rip that out, I'm stapling it back into you." "Copy, Doc," the unknown operator grunted, adjusting his grip. They hustled, across the open strip between the motor pool and the medical tent, ducking as if the sky might still be falling. Overhead, the sirens had wound down, but the bass loudspeakers still repeated, "Lockdown Red remains in effect. Remain under cover," in an endless clinical loop. Inside the tent, Sanders's eyes went wide. "Jesus," he breathed. "You brought half the platoon." "Not even close," Leah said. "Bed 2 for Wilkes. Corbett to 3, Lang on a chair, and don't let him pretend he's tough. Sanders, I need vitals on the outpatient side every 5 minutes. We're about to get busier." She rattled orders as she worked, sliding seamlessly from forward CCP mode to trauma bay choreography. Monitors came alive, beeping out precarious rhythms. Someone started a fresh walking blood bank list, names scrawled under flickering light. Outside, the soundscape shifted. The dull arc of incoming mortar fire had faded. Small arms chatter ebbed and flowed along the base's edge instead, closer in. The fight was collapsing toward the walls. "Tiuxi on Mednet 3, the radio announced in its too calm voice. "All non-essential personnel move to hardened shelters. Repeat, non-essential personnel to hardened shelters. Inner gate is priority infrastructure. Prepare to seal." Leah's hand froze mid-reach. "Sanders, take over here," she said quietly. She wiped her gloves on her blouse, leaving faint smears, then stepped to the small alcove that served as her office, where the clinic's main radio and the CCTV monitor were crammed together. The inner gate feed showed chaos compressed into black and white grain. Vehicles angled across the lane, figures darting between cover, the occasional flare of muzzle flash like lightning caught too late. The blast-rated inner door, just off frame, sat shut for now, but the corridor leading to it remained open, a thin artery of light through the bunker. "Tos, this is HM2 Han at the clinic," she said into the handset. "Confirm intention to seal inner gate." "Affirm, Han," Tok replied. The duty officer's voice was clipped but controlled. "Current ROE places inner gate and TOC as critical nodes. Any breach there compromises the base. We're consolidating." "Do you have all friendly elements inside the gate?" she asked. A pause. Paper rustled, or it might have been someone turning their head. "We are still receiving fragmented reports from Viper elements," the officer admitted, "but everyone has been ordered to fall back." "Ordered isn't inside," she said. Her eyes stayed on the CCTV screen. A figure stumbled in the lane, dragging another by the straps of his plate carrier. "If you close that gate now, you're cutting off anyone still outside." "Han, we appreciate your concern," Tok said, the tone shifting toward patronizing. "Your priority is patient care in the clinic. Let security manage the perimeter." Leah's jaw clenched. "My priority is keeping patients from becoming names on a wall," she said. That includes the ones who haven't made it to my beds yet. Another operator on the net tried to cut in, voice ragged. Toke, this is Viper 2-4. We are retrograding from Sector North toward the inner gate now. 2 urgent and 1 litter. We need that corridor open. Static chewed the last word. Leah glanced through the tent flap. The physical corridor from the clinic to the gate was just a straight stretch of concrete and HESCO. But in her head, it was overlaid with that fragile, blinking word. Open. Tuck, what's your timeline on sealing? She asked. Soonest practical, the officer said. We'll give a 5-minute warning. And your last confirmed friendly crossing? Leah pressed. Time, not theory. Another pause. Last confirmed friendly through inner gate 15 mics ago, Talk said. We're not seeing clean Blue Force tracking beyond that. So you're telling me, Leah said slowly, that your information is 15 minutes stale, and you want to lock the door on anyone who might still be dragging their own lungs towards safety. Han, the officer warned, you're stepping outside your lane. She stared at the CCTV. A group of 3 figures took cover behind a concrete barrier, muzzle flashes sparking from their rifles. Another man lay half in and half out of the frame, one leg twisted at an angle that was wrong in any language. Respectfully, she said, my lane is wherever the bleeding is. Inner gate corridor is part of my CCP whether you like it or not. In the background, another voice cut in on Talk's end, muffled but intent. There was an argument she couldn't quite hear. Her fingers tightened on the handset. Han, Talks came back, tone strained now. We cannot keep that gate unsecured indefinitely. You know what happens if someone rides a push-through, yeah, she said. I've read the same horror stories. This isn't indefinitely. Give me a clock. A real one. You're talking minutes. I can do things with minutes. I can't do anything with a closed blast door and a bunch of what-ifs. The radio went quiet for 3 long heartbeats. Then, fine. You have 10 minutes before we begin sealing procedures. After that, the corridor is locked down. No exceptions. Use them wisely. 10 minutes. She exhaled. Copy. 10 minutes. And Toke. What? Don't put medical concurred on the closure order, she said. This one sits on your desk. The pause this time felt heavier. Understood, Talk replied. She hung the handset back on its hook harder than she needed to. The plastic thunked against metal. Behind her, monitors beeped. Somewhere a patient moaned. Sanders called out a blood pressure reading. The world kept moving. Doc? Holt's voice said. She turned. He stood just inside the trauma bay, helmet still on, vest dusty, eyes flicking between her and the CCTV screen. His hand was empty, fingers flexing as if they missed the weight of a rifle. Tosi just told us to fall back to the inner gate, he said. We're supposed to link with the last of the guys still in the north sector and then punch it straight home. They're shifting security elements inward. I need to know if that gate's going to be open when we get there. Leah felt the 10-minute clock tick loud behind her ribs. You'll have a corridor, she said, for 10. Holt's jaw set. Then we'd better move. He turned to go, then hesitated. You sure about this? He asked. If they get cued outside the wire and ride us in, then I'll be here, she said, nodding toward the trauma beds, picking up whatever's left. That's my end of the decision. He studied her for a moment, something complicated in his gaze. Not quite admiration, not quite accusation. You know, he said, you're terrible at staying in your tent. Comes up on evals, she said. Go. He left at a jog, shouting for his fire team as he went. Through the open flap, she saw them assemble. A handful of silhouettes tightening straps, checking magazines, moving with that bone-deep weariness of men on their second or third sprint into chaos. On the CCTV, the inner gate lane flickered, camera struggling with glare from fires and intermittent power. Leah watched as blue force icons updated in fits and starts on a secondary monitor, lagging behind reality by seconds that felt like minutes. The base shook once, a distant detonation rattling instruments on their trays. "TOC to all elements," the net announced. "Be advised, final consolidation underway. Inner gate will begin sealing procedures in 9 minutes. 9 now. Less than that, really." Leah stepped closer to the inner gate camera until her reflection blurred with the grainy image, her face superimposed over the lane where, any moment now, Holt and whoever he could salvage would appear, running for a door that might or might not still be open. "Don't make me a liar," she muttered, to talk, to the universe, to herself. Outside, somewhere between the north sector and the gate, Holt's team moved through smoke and gunfire. Inside, the trauma bay hummed with fragile life. Between them stretched a corridor of light and concrete and time. For the next few minutes, Leah realized, she held that corridor as surely as if her hands were on the steel of the blast door itself. The trauma bay felt too small for the amount of life and death crammed into it. Monitors beeped, IV pumps hummed, oxygen hissed in soft, steady sighs. Wilkes lay under a thin blanket on bed 2, lips chapped, eyes closed, his cheeks no longer corpse pale but far from healthy. Corbett dozed in a chair with a blanket over his lap and fresh tape on his IV site. Lang paced at the end of the row in tight circles, his patched shoulder held stiff. Leah stood between them and the inner blast door, headset pressed against one ear, eyes locked on the CCTV monitor bolted to the wall. The inner gate camera showed a world in black and white and chaos. The outer lane flickered with smoke and shadows. There were fewer muzzle flashes now, but the ones that remained were closer, sharper. Figures moved in the grainy feed, some hugging cover, some dragging others. "Talk to all elements," the net crackled. "Inner gate sealing procedures commence in 1 minute. Repeat, 1 minute to gate closure. Any remaining friendlies? Move now." 1 minute. Leah's gaze flicked to the clock on the wall. The red digits read 02.1217L. On the screen, movement resolved into familiar outlines. A small group burst from behind a barrier and sprinted toward the gate. 4 figures, one clearly staggering under the weight of another. Holt was in front. Even through the grain, she could see the set of his shoulders, the tilt of his helmet. They were still too far. "Sanders, status," she called without turning. "Wilkes is holding," Sanders said from somewhere behind her. "Pressure's low but stable, Corbett's good. I've got 3 green and 2 yellow waiting for evac that isn't coming until the sky stops trying to kill us." "Copy," she said. The inner blast door loomed beside her, thick slabs of steel and composite set into reinforced concrete. A metal cage guarded the manual override, a heavy lever with chipped yellow paint, locked in the closed position. Beside it, red stenciled letters read, "Warning, inner gate breach, base compromise." Her fingers itched. "Tok, this is HM2 Han at clinic," she said into her mic. "Visual on Viper element moving to inner gate with casualties. They are not inside." "Han, we copy," Tok replied, voice taut. "We've instructed all elements to fall back. They've had their window." "They are in the window," she snapped. "They're not ghosts. I can see them." "ROE is clear," Tok said. "If we keep that gate unsecured and the enemy rides their movement in, we lose more than 1 squad. We lose control of Al-Sara. You know this. On the CCTV, Holt's group hit a patch of open ground. A burst of tracer stitched the space behind them. One of the figures stumbled, then recovered, dragging his burden harder. Leah's chest tightened. She knew the map between that patch of ground and the outer gate door. Knew it in seconds, in heartbeats, in blood volume. Inner gate sealing in 45 seconds. Talk announced on the general net. All elements acknowledge. Acknowledge, came the chorus of tired voices. Leah didn't answer. Holt, this is Han, she said instead, flipping to Viper's net. Status. His reply came in a rush of wind and gunfire. We're moving with 2 urgent, 1 litter, 1 walking stupid. Inner gate in sight. You better have that corridor open, Doc, or I swear. His voice broke off as another burst crackled overhead. The camera shook. Static crawled across the screen. Holt, she said. Say again. Still here, he panted after a second. If we don't act now, we lose the whole team, you understand? We've got maybe 10 seconds in the open. Inner gate sealing in 30 seconds. Talk cut in, louder now, as if volume could enforce finality. Any further delay risks base integrity. Leah stared at the lever. Open the gate and you invited whatever was pacing Holt's heels straight into the heart of the base. Close it, and you turned the corridor into a wall, leaving him and whoever he was dragging to die in sight of safety. 2 options, both unforgiving. Behind her, Wilkes murmured something in his sleep. The monitor by his head beeped, perfectly oblivious to corridors and gates and men sprinting through fire. Han, Talk said, tone sharpening. I need confirmation that the manual override remains in the locked position. We are about to execute remote seal. Her hand rose of its own accord, hovering over the cage. She thought of oaths, of clean lines that had looked so simple in a classroom, divorced from the smell of burned rubber and cordite and blood. Do no harm. You couldn't do that here. All you could do was choose which harm you could live with. Leah. Another voice came through Viper's net, stripped raw now. Holt. No call sign, no protocol. We don't have time for a debate. If that door is closed when we get there, just tell me now. On the screen, his team was closer. Close enough that she could almost pick out individual helmets. The way one man's arm hung wrong. The way another's leg dragged. 10 seconds of open ground. 10 seconds of her hand on a lever. She swallowed. Her throat felt tight, dry. Holt, she said. Keep moving. Do not stop. Gate's going to be shut, isn't it? He said. She didn't answer. Inner gate sealing in 15 seconds, Talk announced. All elements clear the corridor. Leah stepped closer to the lever. The metal of the cage was cool against her glove as she wrapped her fingers around it. The chipped yellow paint flaked under her grip. Han, Talk said warningly. You are not authorized to then arrest me after, she said. Silence crackled on the line. Her mind flipped through every ugly scenario. Enemy fighters tucked in the shadows just outside frame. Holt's team bursting through with a suicide vest hidden under a plate carrier. The blast wave ripping through the trauma bay, turning Wilkes and Corbett and Sanders into shrapnel. Her stomach knotted. Her hand didn't move. On the CCTV, Holt's group hit the last stretch to the gate. A thin strip of brighter ground under a half-working floodlight. Someone went down. Someone else turned back. 5 seconds, Talk intoned. Leah closed her eyes for the space of a heartbeat. When she opened them, the world narrowed to 3 things. The grainy image of men running toward a door, the lever under her hand, and the knowledge that whatever she did next would never feel clean. "Leah," Holt gasped in her ear. "We're at the door. What have you got for us?" Her fingers tightened, then she pulled. The lever didn't open the gate. It screamed in protest as Leah hauled it past the detent, a heavy mechanical thunk echoing through the concrete. Somewhere deep in the wall, something disengaged with a bass clunk that vibrated in her teeth. On the radio, Talk's voice snapped sharp. "Han, what did you just do?" She kept her eyes on the CCTV. Holt's team hit the ground near the outer door, using the last Jersey barrier as cover. Rounds sparked off the concrete around them, flashes white in the grainy feed. "I put the gate in manual hold," she said. Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. "Your remote seal is disabled until I say otherwise." That is a direct violation of a procedure written by someone who wasn't watching people bleed in real time. She cut in. "The blast door is still closed. You're not breached. For now." She dropped the lever into its new slot. Above it, the red remote light died, replaced by a steady amber manual control. To the left of the main handle, a smaller control panel sat recessed into the wall. Most people ignored it. It operated a door everyone pretended wasn't there unless maintenance needed it. The personnel Sally port. Her gloved finger jabbed the button. The indicator next to it flicked from red to green. "Teok," she said, already moving. "I'm opening the inner Sally port only. Blast door stays shut. You still own the big gate. You open anything to the outside and you've created a breach point." Tosi protested. "You don't have the manpower." "I have enough to make a hole and plug it again," she said. "Unless you'd like to explain to Viper that medical signed their death warrant." There was a curse buried in static. Then another voice, deeper, command grade, came on the net. "Han, this is Major Kellerman. You're playing with fire." "Yes, sir," she said. "So is everyone outside." She jogged out of the trauma bay and into the short corridor that led to the inner gate complex. The air here was cooler, concrete sweating faint damp. At the far end, the Sally port door squatted in the wall like an oversized vault hatch, much smaller than the main blast doors beside it. A security element was already forming near it. 3 Marines in full kit. One of them the same sergeant who'd escorted her along the service road earlier. He looked from the amber light above the door to Leah's face. "Tell me you didn't just take over my gate," he said. "You can have it back in a minute," she replied. "We're going out and coming back. That's it." "ROE is clear," he said. "No firing inside the corridor. We shoot past the threshold only. If anything we don't like tries to come in behind you, you close the door," she finished. "Even if I'm not through." He hesitated. "You sure you want that on record?" "I want it understood," she said. "If this goes sideways, you protect the base. I'll live with the rest." He studied her for half a heartbeat, then nodded once. "My team, your call," he said. "You throw the smoke. We move on your step." He reached into a pouch, pulled 2 M18 smoke grenades, popped safety clips. The bright tops looked absurdly cheerful in the harsh, fluorescent corridor. Leah clipped her radio cord higher on her shoulder, adjusted her helmet, and took a breath that didn't go all the way down. "Holt," she said on Viper's net. "You're at the outer door?" "Pinned 2 cars shy of it," he answered, voice raw. Gunfire barked loud in the background. "We've got one who can't walk and one who's barely holding a rifle. Doors shut. We're out of cover." "Listen to me," she said. "There's a personnel door just left of the main inner gate. You're going to see it open. When it does, you move to it under smoke. You do not outrun my grenades, and you do not stop in the lane. You either make that doorway, or you hug the ground and stay down. Understood?" There was a pause. "You're opening the gate?" he asked. "Not the gate," she said. "A crack next to it." He gave a raw, disbelieving laugh. "Doc, if this is your idea of a joke—" 10 seconds in the open, remember?" she said. "I'm trying to make them count." She nodded to the sergeant. He pulled the first smoke pin with a sharp, metallic snap. "On you, Night Doc," he said. Leah hit the Sally port control. The door unsealed with a sigh of pressure equalizing, then began to swing inward on hydraulics. Hot, dirty air rushed in, bringing with it the smell of smoke and propellant and sand. The world outside was a strobing, monochrome mess, floodlights half dead, fires throwing shadow puppets across wreckage. The outer gate lane lay just beyond, a strip of space constantly threatened and never quite safe. She stepped into the threshold, dropped to a knee, and hurled the smoke grenade into the lane. It clanged off the ground, rolled, and began to leak thick, billowing clouds, white in her vision, but swirling into the darkness like a living thing. The sergeant pitched the second farther, creating a wider curtain between the Sally port and the last barrier where Holt's team sheltered. "Tower! This is inner gate!" the sergeant called. "We're deploying smoke. Hold all fire in that lane unless you see muzzle flash inside our smoke. PID only." "Copy, inner gate," Tower replied. "We've got eyes." "Holt, go!" Leah snapped. Figures burst from behind the barrier, wreathed in the flowering smoke. For a moment, they were only shadows in a moving fog, then resolved into men she knew by gait and gear. Leah stepped out just enough to meet them, the Marines stacking around her, weapons pointed outwards, not in. The smoke clawed at her lungs, bitter and cloying. It blurred edges and dissolved depth, turning the lane into a world of ghosts. "First casualty, center," she shouted. 2 shapes emerged, dragging a third between them. The man in the middle sagged, legs barely moving. Blood darkened his trouser leg, soaking down into a makeshift bandage. "Here!" Leah lunged forward, fingers finding the straps of his plate carrier. "I've got him! You two peel off left and right, weapons up!" They did, trusting her grip. The Marines fired short, controlled bursts past them, into flickers of movement at the edge of the smoke. Not blind, never blind, holding to ROE even under pressure. Leah hauled the wounded man backward, boots skidding on sandy concrete. He was heavier than Wilkes, his gear still mostly intact. His weight dragged at her shoulders, pain flaring in the same bruise her aid bag had worn into her skin days ago. "Keep your head down," she barked, though she wasn't sure if he was conscious enough to obey. Hands seized his boots from inside the door, yanking him across the threshold. He vanished into the relative brightness of the corridor. "Next!" she shouted, throat raw. Holt appeared out of the smoke, one arm clamped around a limping operator whose rifle dangled uselessly. Another man stumbled behind them, helmet askew, eyes wide. Leah grabbed the limping man's belt, adding her pull to Holt's push. They lurched through the doorway, feet tangling, shoulders banging into the frame. The sergeant stayed half outside, his rifle a living line drawn against the hazy silhouettes that circled the lane but didn't quite commit. A single round cracked through the smoke, low and mean. It sparked off the door frame inches from Leah's hip. The Marines answered with a disciplined volley, not into the cloud, but past it, where Tower called out a confirmed muzzle flash. "Inside!" the sergeant snapped. "Now!" Leah shoved Holt and the last man fully into the corridor and stumbled after them. The sergeant backpedaled, firing 2 more short bursts. then slammed his palm against the control. The sally port clanged shut. The sound was final, huge in the narrow space. For a moment, everyone just breathed. Harsh, ragged inhales, the clatter of rifles being reslung, the hiss of smoke still clinging to gear. Holt leaned against the wall, helmet tipped back, chest heaving. His face was streaked with soot and sweat, eyes bright in a way Leah recognized as the crackling edge of shock. "You're insane," he said between breaths. "Frequently," she replied. He glanced toward the trauma bay, where Sanders and another corpsman were already rushing forward with litters. "You get us killed. I'm haunting your sick call," he said. "You get us through. I guess I owe you a drink we're not allowed to have." Behind them, the distant gunfire outside the wall began to taper, not gone but less constant. The base wasn't safe. Wouldn't be, not really. But the immediate pressure on the gate had eased. Leah watched as the new casualties were wheeled past her toward the beds, trailing mud and blood and the stink of burned cloth. One man's leg was splinted in a way that told her, at a glance, he'd never put weight on it again. Another's hand was swaddled in dressings too bulky to hide how much was missing. Alive, though. Alive now, when a sealed door would have made them statistics. "TOC to inner gate," Major Kellerman's voice came over the net. "Status." The sergeant looked at Leah, eyebrows raised. She nodded. "Inner gate holding," he said. "Sally port closed. No enemy penetration. Viper element recovered." There was a pause on the net, full of things unsaid. "Copy," Kellerman said finally. "Good work. Medical, get us a casualty report when you can." Leah exhaled slowly. Her hands had started to shake now that the lever, the smoke, the sprint were memories instead of tasks. She flexed her fingers once, forcing the tremor out, and turned back toward the trauma bay. There were still choices to make. Scalpel instead of steel doors. But the nature of them hadn't changed. Hurt now to prevent a worse hurt later. Different tools. Same war. As she stepped into the harsh white light, the cameras behind her kept recording an empty corridor and a closed door, proof that, at least this time, the line had held. The shooting tapered off by inches, not all at once. Leah heard it change as she moved from bed to bed, single shots instead of bursts, then intermittent reports, then a long, shaky silence broken only by the low thrum of distant engines and the hiss of oxygen. "Al-Sara, this is Dustoff 1-1, the radio crackled, a new voice cutting through the exhaustion. "Airspace is clearing. We are inbound for medevac. 30 mics out. Say again, 30 minutes. 30 minutes. Leah glanced at the wall clock. 03:02L. They were deep into the ugliest part of the night now, when adrenaline burned out and the real accounting began. "Sanders," she called. "Update on reds and yellows." He stood in the middle of the bay, clipboard in hand, uniform stained, eyes rimmed red. "We've got 4 red tags," he said. "Wilkes, Kahn, Ortega, and the chief. 3 yellows trending red if they don't get a ride soon." "Which chief?" she asked, already moving. "Senior Chief Gomez," Sanders said. "He took shrapnel in the flank on the way back. We just got him through the door." Gomez. Leah pictured him from briefings. The man who always seemed carved from something harder than the others. The one the younger operators unconsciously mirrored. Not Briggs, but the next pillar down. She reached his bed. Gomez lay on his side, or tried to, restrained by straps that kept him in position while blood soaked the pads beneath him. His face was gray, lips drawn tight. Someone had cut his shirt away, A thick dressing covered most of his left flank, edges blooming red despite the pressure. "Chief," Leah said, "it's Han. You're at the clinic. I need your head with me." His eyes opened, sharp and dark. "Could have fooled me," he rasped. "Feels like I'm under the truck." "Truck would be heavier," she said. "You lucked out." She checked his vitals. Pressure low, heart rate high, skin clammy. The wound was in that miserable zone. Too lateral for a simple belly shot, too deep to ignore. She'd need imaging and time to know exactly how bad it was. She had neither. 2 units of OPA's in, Sanders said, reading from his notes. "We're out of O-neg. Walking blood bank is spun up, but people are dropping fast." "Who's our best surgical bet?" Leah asked quietly. "Of the Reds." "Wilkes stabilized with the forward transfusion," Sanders said. "Still critical, but he's bought himself a ticket. Ortega's abdominal, hard, distended. Khan's got a chest wound that's not pretty. And Gomez." "And Gomez," she echoed. The small surgery space at the back of the tent was barely more than an alcove. Enough for 1 table, 1 set of lights, a rack of instruments. They could do damage control there, not full repairs. Get in, stop the worst leaks, get out. The rest would have to wait for higher-level care. "Dustoff can take how many urgent?" she asked into the air. Sanders tapped the radio card. "They're bringing 2 birds," he said. "Each can take 2 litters and 2 walking max. TOC wants at least 1 slot reserved for non-military, contractors in bad shape." Of course they did. She didn't argue. Civilians bled the same. "Then we can realistically get 3 critical out and expect them to see an OR before sunrise," she said. "Maybe 4 if everything aligns." "And we have 4 red tags," Sanders said. Wilkes on bed 2, Ortega on bed 4, abdomen rigid under a tented blanket, eyes glazed with pain. Khan on bed 5, breathing in short, shallow gasps around a dressing taped over his side. Gomez here, glaring at her like he could strong-arm his way back onto a target package by will alone. Leah felt something in her chest tighten, like a band ratcheting down. She moved down the line. Wilkes first. She listened to his heart, checked the lines, watched his numbers hold in their precarious range. He'd already had his big intervention. Pulling him from the evac queue now would be throwing away every drop Corbett had bled for him in that lane. "He goes," she said. No debate. "Next, Ortega." She pressed gently on his abdomen. He winced, biting off a curse, tears leaking from the corners of his eyes. "How long have you been guarding that?" she asked. "Feels like weeks," he rasped. "Probably an hour." "Feels doesn't count," she said, but her fingers confirmed it. Internal bleeding, pressure rising. Without a surgeon and a scope, he was a slow-motion crash. "Khan," she said, stepping to his bed. He tried to sit up when he saw her, then slumped back with a hiss, the bandage over his chest and side strained with every breath. "Doc," he said, "you're gonna tell me I'm fine, right? Just a scratch. Send me back to the line." "Sure," she said. "Next lifetime." His oxygen sat at a number she didn't like. Probable lung involvement, maybe more. Gomez watched her the whole time, expression unreadable. When she returned to his bedside, he spoke before she did. "Doc," he said, "you don't waste a bird on an old man with a hole in his side. You know that?" "You're not old," she said. "Older than Ortega," he replied. "Older than Khan. Older than that kid with the leg you just dragged in. I've had my run." "It's not about." "It is," he said, voice sharp despite the strain. It's about who walks away with the best odds if you spend what you've got. You know it. I know it. Don't you dare make me the exception because I look good on a wall. She swallowed. The back of her throat tasted like metal and stale coffee. This isn't a vote, she said. He gave a thin, humorless smile. Then what are you doing, Doc? Taking a survey? Around them, the bay blurred. She could hear someone retching in the far corner, a nurse calling out a medication dose, the radio murmuring about inbound birds and approach vectors. It all faded into static behind Gomez's breathing. I can get one of you into damage control surgery before the birds land, she said. Stabilize, pack, get them ready to fly. The others will get what we can give them here and hope. She looked him in the eye. If I choose wrong, someone dies who didn't have to. He held her gaze. Someone's dying either way, he said softly. Only question is whether you do it by accident or on purpose. Her chest ached. She thought of the lever in her hand at the gate, of the sally port, of smoke and weight and the sound of the door slamming shut. Of choosing harm she could justify. She made herself look at numbers, not faces. Wilkes, invested resources, improving. Ortega, time-sensitive abdominal bleed, good baseline health, early enough for intervention. Khan, severe but potentially survivable chest, responsive, not yet crashing. Gomez, unknown deep damage, already on his second unit of blood, older, system under strain. Chief, she said quietly, if I put you on that table and sink another few units into you, Ortega doesn't get them. Khan might not either. I can't guarantee you make it off my table. I can't guarantee they do either. But if I pick you, I am choosing you over them. His eyes softened, just a fraction. That's what rank always was, he said. Somebody gets picked. Tonight you don't pick me. It should have hurt more that he made it easy. It did anyway. She nodded once, a small, sharp motion. Sanders, she said, voice firmer now. Prep the surgical bay for Ortega. Get anesthesia tied in, minimal. Khan gets next bird priority after Wilkes. Chief Gomez. She hesitated, just long enough to feel it. Chief Gomez stays here, she finished. Max conservative care, pain control, keep him warm. No more blood unless his pressure tank's beyond salvage. Sanders's face flickered, pain and understanding warring. Yes, ma'am, he said. Gomez exhaled, slow. Guess I get to be the example, he murmured. You get to be honest, she said. She wanted to say more. She didn't. There wasn't time. In the makeshift surgical space, Ortega gripped her wrist as they prepped. Doc, he said, eyes wide. I heard. Are you sure about this? No, she said. I'm never sure. But I like your odds. He snorted weakly. You really suck at pep talks. Shut up and let me keep you alive, she said. The next 30 minutes blurred into a tight circle of light and motion. Incision, pack, clamp, pack again. Her world shrank to the color of blood in suction tubing, the feel of tissue under gloves, the numbers on a monitor that beeped an unpredictable rhythm. Somewhere in the middle of it, the distant thump of rotor blades began to build. The medevac birds. Dust off 1-1 on final, the radio crackled. Landing pad green, bring us your uglies. They rolled Ortega out as they rolled Khan in for loading. Wilkes went next, still riding the narrow line between here and somewhere else. By the time Leah peeled off her outer gloves and stepped back into the main bay, sweat chilled on her spine. The birds were lifting. The sound faded, carrying 3 of her decisions into the dark. She went back to Gomez's bed. His breathing was shallower now. His color had leached further toward gray. The monitor at his side told its own quiet story. "Doc," he said, voice thin. "How's the kid?" "On a bird," she said. "Bought himself another sunrise." He managed a faint nod. "Good." She stood there a long time, one hand on the rail, listening as his breaths stretched farther apart. She didn't need the monitor to tell her when they stopped. Later, someone would note the time of death. Later, someone would write the notification letter and dress it in careful words. Leah only knew that when she finally forced herself to move away, the space beside his bed felt heavier than if his body had still occupied it. Around her, the bay hummed with the business of survival. Sanders adjusted drips. A nurse changed a dressing. Outside, Dawn waited somewhere beyond the torn canvas and concrete. "Doc?" Holt's voice came from behind her, quiet. She turned. He stood in the doorway, bandaged hand tucked against his chest, eyes tracking from Gomez's still form to her face. "Birds made it out?" he asked. "They made it," she said. He nodded slowly. His gaze drifted back to Gomez. "Not all of us, though." "No," she said. He studied her for a long moment. There was no accusation in his eyes, not yet. Just a raw, aching question about how any of this was supposed to feel. Leah didn't have an answer. "Get some water," she said instead. "You're about to crash, and I don't have a spare IV for stubborn." He huffed a sound that might have been a laugh, might have been a choke, and stepped back. When he was gone, she looked once more at Gomez, at the empty space he left in the formation, and then turned back to the living. There were still charts to write, vitals to check, and decisions to sign her name under. The night had ended, but the part she'd carry had just begun. By the time the sun dragged itself over the horizon, the canvas of the medical tent glowed a dull beige, and Leah's eyes felt sanded from the inside. The radios had gone from frantic to merely busy. Security reports drifted in like aftershocks. Sectors cleared, ammo counts, damage assessments. The medevac birds were gone, carrying Wilkes, Ortega, Kahn, and a few others toward operating rooms Leah would never see. Inside the clinic, the tempo dropped from sprint to forced march. Dressings needed changing. Pain meds had to be timed and logged. Bodies, living and not, had to be accounted for. Someone from personnel hovered in the doorway with a clipboard, asking for names and service numbers. Leah kept moving until motion blurred into habit. Glove on, glove off, signature here, date there, time of death, 0347L. She wrote it once and tried very hard not to write it again in her head. "Doc," Sanders said quietly, "you've been on your feet since before the first impact. You should rack out for an hour. I can hold the herd." She glanced at the wall clock. "Autumn, 10L. I need to drop paperwork at Viper's ready room," she said. "Tioka wants initial casualty summaries before the noon brief. After that, I'll pretend to sleep." Sanders looked like he wanted to argue. Instead, he nodded. "Copy. I'll keep everyone breathing in the meantime." She stripped off her gloves, washed her hands until the water ran clear and her skin burned, then pulled on a fresh blouse from her footlocker. The old one went into a biohazard bag, stiff with dried blood and smoke. Outside, Alsara looked like a place that had been hit and then hurriedly tidied for inspection. Fire-blackened patches marked where vehicles had burned. A wall near the motor pool bore fresh pockmarks. Someone had already started hosing down a section of concrete where a lot of something had spilled. The air smelled of bleach overlaid on smoke. Leah walked toward Viper's corner of the compound, with a manila folder under one arm. Her aid bag was stored back in the tent. She felt oddly naked without it. The ready room was a long, low building that had always smelled of sweat, coffee, and gun oil. This morning was no different, just more tired. Voices murmured inside, low, rough, punctuated by the occasional scrape of a chair. She paused at the door, then pushed it open. Conversation faltered but didn't stop. A few heads turned, most stayed bowed over mugs or gear. Riker stood near a table covered in maps, talking quietly with Major Kellerman. Holt sat on a bench, one hand bandaged, staring at nothing in particular. Leah went for the bulletin board by the door, where official forms went to die. She slid the casualty summary packet into the tray labeled Admin and was about to leave when the whiteboard next to it caught her eye. She knew that board. It had been waiting for her the day she arrived. Names and numbers scrawled in different hands, categories at the top. Fastest night ruck, best night fire, marksmanship, longest time, outside cover, O course, full kit. At the very bottom, in smaller letters, there had been a line. Han, O course, aid bag, and a time bad enough to earn its own jokes. Now that line was gone. The board had been wiped clean and rewritten. Some names were the same. Some numbers had changed, annotated with tiny, pre-attack notes, as if to differentiate training from whatever last night had been. A new row sat between Nightfire and time outside cover, squeezed in with less than regulation neatness. Contact hits, live, service road, nods assist. Han, 7 below it. Another, movement under fire, service road to Sally Port. Aid bag, litter drag. Han, 101, she stared at it. Tower insisted on the 7, a voice said behind her. They were counting. Leah turned. Holt leaned against the wall a few feet away, mug in his good hand, eyes as red-rimmed as hers. His uniform bore fresh tape where medics had patched him. Dried smoke still traced the lines of his face. I told them I thought it was 5, he went on. They sent the thermal replay. I stopped arguing. It was dark, she said. Dark for you, he replied. Not for them. She looked back at the board. Her old obstacle course time was gone, erased. Not just overwritten. In its place, someone had written, Inner Gate Movement, Night, Lockdown Han, 043. The time wasn't labeled record or not. It didn't need to be. Every other number on that board had a name next to it. Only hers appeared 3 times. This isn't necessary, she said. Nah, Holt said. But you know how we are. We keep score. Helps us pretend there's a pattern. Last night wasn't a competition, she said. Her voice came out flatter than she intended. Could have fooled me, he said softly. Felt a lot like do it faster or someone dies. That counts. Across the room, Riker looked over, as if sensing the shift in air. He said something to Kellerman, then walked toward them. The room's murmur dipped a little more. Han, he said, stopping by the board. His gaze tracked the new entries, then dropped to her face. We're sending these numbers up to the Olympic Committee. She blinked. Sir? He smiled faintly, a tired, lopsided thing. Joke, Han. Oh, she said. Right. He sobered. Tower sent us their footage, he said. The service road engagement, the Sally Port evolution. I don't hand out compliments for free, so you can assume I mean this. You did more than your job last night. A lot more. I did my job, she said. Just in inconvenient places. He nodded once. We're good with inconvenient if it keeps people breathing. For a second, she thought he might say more. Instead, he uncapped a marker, and under her name in the contact hits row, added in small, neat letters, conditions, real. Then he stepped back. There were no claps, no speeches. A few of the men glanced up, eyes flicking from the board to her, then back down to their coffee or their weapons. Something in the room's temperature shifted a degree, barely noticeable unless you'd been living in it. Leah's skin crawled under the attention. The board felt like a spotlight pointed at moments she would have preferred to leave in the half-dark where they'd happened. "I should get back," she said. "Patients don't chart themselves." Riker gave a short nod. "Understood, Doc." Holt's gaze followed her as she turned to go. "Hey, Han," he said. She paused. "You didn't just keep score," he said. "You kept us. Don't forget that when you're staring at your paperwork." She said nothing, because anything she tried would come out wrong. Instead, she left. Back at the clinic, the noise felt almost gentle after the ready room. Beeps, low voices, the rustle of blankets. She went to her desk, sat, and pulled a chart toward her. A paper cup sat beside the keyboard. Steam curled from it. She hadn't made coffee. Leah glanced around. Sanders was at bed 3, adjusting a drip. No one else looked her way. She lifted the cup. The smell was strong, bitter, exactly the way Senior Chief Briggs took his. On the rim, in black marker, someone had written 3 letters, small and almost an afterthought. Doc. She stared at the word, then at the doorway to the faintly echoing world beyond the canvas. The night had written her name on their board in numbers and times. Someone had decided that wasn't quite enough. Leah took a sip. It was terrible coffee. She put it down and picked up her pen anyway. The second night after the attack was almost too quiet. By 2100 L, the worst of the wreckage had been pushed to the perimeter. Fresh Hesco stood where gaps had been, seams still clean of dust. The fires were out. The only glow came from the usual security lights and the scattered cigarettes of sentries who thought they were hidden. Al-Sara's generators hummed their endless note. The base had the brittle feel of a place pretending to be normal again. Leah sat at the end of a row of beds in the clinic, a tablet balanced on her knees. Most of the cots were occupied by sleep or sedatives. Bandages were clean, IV bags half-drained, monitors steady. The worst of her reds were either on flights to bigger hospitals or past the immediate cliff edge. For the first time in nearly 48 hours, no one was actively dying in front of her. Sanders approached with 2 mugs, dark circles carved under his eyes. "You on or off?" he asked. "On," she said. "For the next hour, at least." He handed her a mug. The coffee smelled better than Briggs, less burned, more like an actual choice. "Riker came by while you were checking on Wilkes," Sanders said. "Wants you in their planning thing, over at Viper's ready room." "Planning?" she repeated. "New night exercise," Sanders said. "Lessons learned, or whatever phrase they're using to mean, let's not almost die that way again." She took a sip. It scalded her tongue, anchoring her in a way she didn't entirely like. "You've got this here?" she asked. He nodded. "All your problem children are stable. I'll call you if anyone tries something dramatic." "Don't let them," she said, setting the mug down. "I used all my drama quota this week." The walk to the ready room felt shorter than the one she'd made that morning, but heavier. The sky overhead was cloudless. Stars burned bright and indifferent above the concrete and concertina wire. Inside the ready room, the air smelled of dry erase marker, coffee, and the metallic tang of wiped-down weapons. A map of the base had been taped to the wall, new lines and symbols marked in red and blue. Riker stood with Major Kellerman and the security sergeant from the Sally Port, heads bent together. Holt sat on a bench nearby, sling on his arm now, a notebook open on his knee. Riker looked up when she entered. "Han," he said, Glad you could join us. I was voluntold, she said. That's how we show respect, the security sergeant said. We drag you into meetings. Kellerman tapped the map. We're redesigning the night live fire and movement drills, he said, incorporating what we learned the hard way. ROE's been updated. Inner perimeter gets more authority to interdict if we see credible infiltration. But no one's touching the no-fire corridor doctrine without a brigade lawyer in the room. His mouth twitched. We want your take. Medical and movement. Leah moved closer to the map. The lines overlaid on it told a story she recognized. Primary patrol routes, alternate paths, choke points. The alley between the motor pool and inner gate was there now, drawn in a different color. You named it yet? She asked, nodding at the alley. Hans Lane, Holt said. Absolutely not, she replied. We're workshopping, Riker said dryly. He gestured to a cluster of symbols near the inner gate. Here's the problem. We can teach these guys to shoot, move, and communicate in their sleep. What we can't easily teach is what you did. Balancing ROE, civilian corridors, and people screaming for help in 3 different places at once. Leah frowned at the map. You want to turn that into a drill. We want them to practice making decisions before it's live again, Riker said. We're going to build scenarios around limited blood, divided casualties, and gates that may or may not close when they want them to. And we want you to help us break them, on paper, so they don't break for real. Her first instinct was revulsion. The idea of turning last night into a scripted exercise felt wrong, like copying a scar into a training manual. You start running these scenarios, she said slowly. You're going to put people into the same box. No good choices, just harm, redistributed. That's war, Kellerman said quietly. We keep pretending it's not, then act surprised when someone freezes. You didn't freeze. We need that on the grid. Holt's gaze was on her, steady. If we'd had a rep of that Sallyport run in training, he said, we might have shaved 30 seconds off last night. Maybe Gomez buys one more pulse, maybe not. But I'd like my guys to have the reps, Doc, not just the stories. She felt the band around her chest tighten again. Stay out of it, she thought. Let them design their own ways to get shot at. If I help you, she said, eyes still on the map, I'm helping you send them back out into the same mess. I'm building better ways to risk them. You're also building better ways to bring them back, Riker said. You're already part of the machine, Han. Question is whether you're in the room when we decide how it runs. Silence stretched for a moment, broken only by the faint squeak of Holt's pen as he turned it between his fingers. Leah thought of Wilkes's heartbeat under her fingers, of Gomez's last breath, of smoke curling through the Sallyport, of the record board with her name in places she hadn't asked for. She exhaled. All right, she said. You want my version? Fine. Here's your scenario. She tapped the map, fingers sure now. We run a night lane. Half the team gets hit near the outer wall, half near contractor housing. You've got 1 unit of blood forward, 2 volunteers, and a no-fire corridor full of panicked civilians. TOC starts a gate closure countdown, and we let them decide who gets what, and when they pull back. That's cheerful, the sergeant muttered. You asked, she said. Riker uncapped a marker and started jotting notes. We'll build it, he said. We'll run it. More than once. She nodded. The decision settled uneasily in her bones, but it settled. If she'd learned anything this week, it was that pretending not to choose was still choosing. They spent the next hour sketching routes and contingencies. Leah added small, ruthless details. A pre-staged aid bag here, a known blind camera there, a no-fire sign that forced a longer path. The others contributed fields of fire, breach points, likely responses. By the time they stepped out into the cooler night air, the stars had shifted a little overhead. On her way back to the clinic, Leah passed the ready room's open door. The whiteboard inside was visible from the hallway, her name still written in 3 places in black marker. She slowed just long enough to look. Then she reached in, flicked off the room's light, and closed the door behind her. The board stayed where it was, waiting. So did the alley, the gates, the scenarios they were about to script. Al-Sara's generators hummed on. Somewhere beyond the wire, the war waited for its next move. Inside, under the canvas and fluorescence, Leah headed back to her patients, to her charts, and to whatever came after records no one had ever meant her to break.